I knew somebody who happened to be living in Nebraska at the time, who happened to be working at a small motel. The motel wasn't really that fancy. It was just your typical motel where people come to check in when they're driving for road trips and vacation, etc., and they stay there for a night and continue on. This actually happened to one of the friends that one of my close friends knew. His name name happened to be Lee. Lee was in his early 20s when this happened, and it was sometime, I think a year or so ago. Lee was working the night shift at this really cheap and interesting motel. It's not the best or the fanciest, but Lee had to get a job as most of the time his parents were one of those people that would ask him to go and get a job so he can make money to help him pay for his expenses and that. Now Lee had grown up with a very few parents that would be like this, so he didn't really had any much of a problem. The motel was paid decent, although he had to work night shifts, which is one he really dreaded to work at. But he couldn't really complain as the day shifts were full, and with him at school, he couldn't really do night shifts due to that. However, it was happened a few nights into his shift when something really freaky happened. I believe what happened, and it might have been on a Thursday night. He came in and had to do a bit of overnight since the other guy who originally worked with him had called in sick. Lee ended up taking 2 double shifts, which of course he only had to work from 8 p.m. all the way to 2 p.m. Hey, it was a little bit of better pay, so he took it, so it was no problem. Since Friday was a day when there was no school on the Friday, so the next day, so Lee was relieved and didn't have to worry about going to school. He ended up doing what he was doing. Basically making sure all the customers are checked in their rooms, give them the keys, etc. Lee was doing his normal shift when all of a sudden he heard what seemed to be banging coming from one of the rooms of the motel. Honestly, he had no idea who it was and thought that maybe it might have been a family that came here with their kids, and the kids might have been rowdy. But however, this was around 11 p.m. and most of the time everybody was either for doing their own thing on their quiet time or they were sleeping. Lee then walked down the hallway thinking he heard something down his right, but then he ended up hearing what seemed to be loud banging, and it sounded like someone banging on the door. There was this one room, however, that wasn't checked in, and he ended up realizing that the room happened to be room 1011. Or room 11. He ended up walking towards room 11 and ended up opening the door. To his shock, he saw absolutely no one there, and there was certainly nobody who appeared to be there. He searched the motel but couldn't find anything, so he ended up closing the door, but only to hear banging as soon as he closed it. He opened it, but absolutely found no one there. He decided to end up reporting this to another worker who happened to be his boss working the night shift. He ended up telling his boss about how room 111 was having bangs of someone from the inside of the motel. The boss ended up giving him a confusing look. No one hasn't really checked in that room in years. I don't know who or what could be inside that room. This happened about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and this happened to be a teacher of mine who used to do night shifts as a security guard at a local mall. His name was Marty, and he had a wife with his kids, and it was around the time when all the teachers and staff were off from school for the summer. I can't remember if this was in 2015 or 2016, maybe 2017, but this was back then when Marty ended up looking for a summer job. Most of the time he worked at fairgrounds and even at theme parks just to make a little bit of extra cash on the side when he's off of job for the summer. Most of the time his wife worked, but he decided to take the opportunity to be a security guard. His two kids were about 8 and 7, so he basically was doing his job as a security guard. While his job as a security guard in the mall, it was mainly the night shift where he had to make sure that nobody was in the mall causing mischief, robbing anything, etc. He was walking around the mall and was making sure that all the shutters in that were closed. However, during his night shift, he ended up looking around, but he ended up seeing what seemed to be someone running down the hallway. It was in one of the back areas of the mall, so we ended up following whoever that was. The other two security guards were down in the first floor, but they were located in other places, and the rest, and a couple of them were on the second floor, so he couldn't really radio them in unless it was absolutely necessary. He ended up looking over to see where the man had run, and he followed whoever was running. When he came across this storage room, he opened it. He looked to see that there was a homeless man. He seemed to be maybe graying hair, in his early 30s, mid-30s, early 40s or something. But the thing was that when he picked up his hair, the gray hair was pretty much a wig. It honestly surprised Marty and had no idea why this guy who was homeless pretending to have gray hair. I guess maybe it might have been his appearance to fool anyone or something. Marty ended up calling the cops for it, but just then, this homeless guy then began to charge right at Marty. Marty was knocked down, but he was able to get him to stop when he ended up running past him. But when this man ended up trying to run, two other security guards managed to tase him, and they ended up calling the police for backup, who arrested the man. They found out later that he was somewhat of a dangerous homeless man, and he had been in and out of certain places like malls and that for the last 2 years. He was mentally unstable, so they couldn't really tell why this man was mentally unstable and going to certain places to hide. But Martin was very lucky that he's still alive, because if he had not checked that storage room closet, something would have happened to him that night if he didn't check. Now, I do apologize for how short this story is, but this actually happened to one of my friends who happened to be working at McDonald's at the time of this story. We'll call her by the name Caitlin, and this took place sometime when she was 16 years old back in 2019. Now, she was working the night shift at McDonald's as her boss had put her through weekly night shifts, which she dreaded. However, she got the day shift at least 2 or 3 times, but that was besides the point. She ended up getting the night shifts on one of the days, and it happened to be on a really slow night where there weren't really a lot of customers at the time. Since there weren't a lot of customers, Caitlin decided to go clean the bathrooms, but when she got there, she realized that the lights were not working. Most likely the lights might have been out in the boys' bathroom or something, but weren't really sure. However, when she stepped inside, the lights all of a sudden flickered on, and then there was a laugh of a child. Caitlin ended up screaming in the bathroom and ended up going to tell a couple co-owners workers that there was someone in the bathroom. When they looked in the bathroom, they said that they did not see any child or anyone laughing in the bathroom. Just to keep this in mind, this is not really night shift type of story like in a store or whatever, but this actually happened to be a house sitter that stayed a few nights there, so I guess it's a night shift story, so to speak. This happened to one of my neighbors back in 2017, back sometime in the summer, which the person in this story I'll have her known as Tanis. Tanis was house sitting for her grandparents, who happened to be away during that week because they were going on vacation. Now, her grandparents were in their 70s, and Tanis was about 18 at the time, so she decided to take the job up for her grandparents, looking after the house while looking after their pet Rottweiler named Muffin. Muffin was a very sweet Rottweiler, and she ended up liking people, but although she was very protective in most cases. So Tanis was staying at least a couple nights at her grandparents' place, to which she brought over her stuff such as her phone, laptop, stuff for to do, such as her video game console, etc. She stayed on the first night there, and there was literally no problems. However, it was when the third night something started to happen. The first 2 nights went out as normal, as Tanis went back to her house and her family's house, the parents she lived with, just to get a few things if she needed, because since she was going to be staying with her Muffin at her grandparents' house for a couple days while they were on vacation. The third night was when things started to get really strange. Now, Tanis was sleeping when all of a sudden she heard what seemed to be laughter, like the Wicked Witch of the West laugh, coming from the basement. Tanis ended up thinking, what the heck was going on down there? She thought it could have been one of those Halloween decorations that may have gone off, or maybe something must have been pushing it in the boxes in the basement. She ended up going to the basement to see, but she couldn't really, but the thing had no batteries in it, so this was odd. Tanis went back upstairs, but it wasn't until the 4th day when she heard that laugh again. This time, Tanis decided she would go check out the basement for herself. She ended up checking out the whole basement, but found no one in there. Not even in the laundry room, the boiler room. There was no one down there, and this was getting really freaky. Tanis never really told anybody about this, thinking that someone would not believe her, but this is going to be freaky. Fast forward to around the end of 2017. Her parents and her grandparents were invited to stay the night, as unfortunately, due to a family emergency with Tanis's grandpa in the hospital, they ended up staying at their house for a few nights. One night, however, when the parents have gone to the hospital, Tanis stayed back to watch over the house and Muffin. However, she ended up looking down again, and she heard the laugh again in the basement. When she went there to check and ask who was down there was nobody in the basement, even at nighttime. She tried to confess this to her parents at one point, that there was someone or something in the basement, but they didn't buy it, thinking that she might have been not sleeping or something, as they had lectured her about it. So, since that day, Tanis has never heard or seen anyone in that basement, and nothing like this has ever happened since.